Hello, my friend. Welcome. I hope you're having an outstanding day. This is Heather. This is the Back to Me podcast, and yet another awesome episode with another awesome person. And today's awesome person is Lisa Schwaller. And hi, Lisa.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you? And
So good.
yes, Lisa has a podcast, Two Friends. It's called Less Stress, More Fun. And that's what we're going to talk about today in many shapes and forms, I think. Yes, right, Lisa?
100%.
100%. We're going to go all over the place. But first, this is something I always ask people because I'm just such a curious person. How did you get into what you do now? And
Yes.
include in that, you can tell people what you do now besides
Yes.
less stress.
Yes. So I am a master certified coach. That was certification number 4 in coaching. I found coaching um, years ago. My kids were young. I was recently divorced, and I just noticed that my oldest son and I had very different things going on personality wise. And
Right.
I thought I was being encouraging, and I could just tell he was feeling a little deflated. So I was really into the Clifton Strengths. It was called Strengths Finder back in
Oh,
the
yeah.
day. And I loved it so much that I really just wanted to apply it. And I wanted to apply it in my parenting. I wanted to apply it at work in a corporate setting. So that was my first certification was a 9-month deep dive into how to apply the strengths, how to read your strengths results and how to apply them. And then just in the years since, I have really, really thoroughly enjoyed learning that even though we're busy, we're overwhelmed. I tend to work with overwhelmed working parents who are wondering where their old self went. They don't know when they're going to get their life back.
Right.
I hear that phrase a
The pre
lot.
kids life.
Exactly. And I'm like, your life is happening right now. Like, wouldn't it be great if you could live with less stress, more fun today? And I really think coaching is like the most effective way to getting at what's causing you the stress so you can let that fun in.
Right. It's just
Yeah.
so true. Because I coach as well. I totally believe everybody should have a coach. you
Hmm.
know, everybody could use someone at some point who is objective and can help you.
Yes.
And Clifton Strengths. It's so funny.
Hmm.
I interviewed someone who specifically does Clifton Strengths coaching
Hmm. Uh-huh.
in March, and we went through mine, and it was hilarious.
Yeah.
And you will find this funny. My lowest score was focus,
Oh,
which is
that's
makes me laugh my butt off.
yeah. I just love that framework because it almost like gives you permission, not that you need permission, but it's like it's a way to say, "Oh, well this is low for me. It's just not something even worth developing." And I think
Right.
sometimes we spend so much time trying to like retrofit or correct things that are wrong with us when it's just so much more fun to have to focus on like what's great about us and do
And
as
what we're
much of that
really
as
good at.
possible.
Like
You're right.
if you focus on what you're really good at, then
Yeah.
you just feel awesome all the time.
Yes.
Do you still use
Yes.
the Clifton Strengths when you're doing the relationship stuff?
Yes. So if people have their assessment or if they're interested, I definitely will factor that into the work that we do. It's not my primary focus because quite honestly, sometimes people don't want to take a test before
Yeah.
they get started with coaching. But yeah, definitely if somebody has their strengths, whether it's their top 5 or their full, and they want to learn like what it means or how to apply it, or like for example for me strengths, I think there's so much about applying strengths to your professional development, but it completely was the start of transforming the relationship with my kids. I just stopped asking my kids to be something they weren't,
Right.
and I stopped thinking like my way was the preferred way just because I'm so strong in it.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
really good at this. Everybody be like me.
Yes, yes.
And
Yeah.
and understanding, I can remember one of the first ones that I ever did when I was in corporate was the Myers-Briggs, and
Hmm.
then you do the colors like you do them all when you're in corporate.
Yes.
And they were kind of interesting. to help you understand why you do the things you do.
Hmm.
But also, I mean, I can see that it would be valuable to understand not only coworkers but your partners. Like, why do they
Absolutely.
do that? Ah, they're making me crazy. But maybe that's just the way they are,
Right.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes, and when it's funny you mentioned the color one. I don't know if that's with the blocks. I don't even remember what
there's a
that one's
couple different
called.
ones.
There's so many of them, but this one they would actually give you like these little foam Lego like blocks, and you'd stack them in the order that you tested. And I thought that was great at work because if you know you're walking into a yellow, you know, cube, you can adjust your communication to actually help them relate to you more easily. And it was such an easy adjustment for people to make. So I think really knowing and appreciating that we all have something different, and the things that drive us crazy are they're just differences in expectation, they're just differences in perspective. And I like these kind of frameworks because it for one thing, I think it feels really good when you get your results and you're like, yeah, that's so me.
Yeah,
I
right.
think it's really like affirming. But then when you know that like your partner or, people that you work with, when you know that there's those differences with what they lead with, then you're not asking everyone to bend to you or just being unsuccessful and just throwing things,
Really. I mean,
throwing spaghetti on the wall, as they say. You can
yeah.
go, oh, my partner is really like high relationship domain or really high strategic, and or they're really people who just like to get things done and don't like the fluff. You can actually tailor your communication style so they're more likely to hear you and you're more likely to get what you want anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, it
Yeah.
just helps with not saying that you're always bending to someone else, but
Yeah.
knowing how to speak to someone in a way that they can receive it is so helpful,
Hmm. It is.
right?
It
And then
is.
you have less stress.
Yes.
Love
Yes.
that. And so when you're doing relationships,
Mhm.
because I guess you work quite a bit with couples, you were saying couples who
Mhm.
suddenly have kids and like, where did our relationship go?
Mhm.
Hopefully
Mhm.
they discover that before the kids are gone.
Mhm.
Because sometimes I find it's like the kids are gone and
Yeah.
they look at each other and say, who are you? Right?
Yes. Yes.
Which is also not a good place.
Yes. And they will, or that's even if the relationship, persists through the challenges. I think parenting really brings out a lot of, um, it just brings a lot to the surface. There's the way we were parented when we were young and things we want to keep and things we definitely don't want to do. And I think a lot of unwritten, like unrealized rules come percolating to the surface when people are parenting. And, everybody wants to do the best job they can with raising their kids, but it's very rare for couples to agree on how. And I think
Wow.
sometimes that can build in some distance is they're like, how could you possibly think that that's a good option for our kid? Um, and then it becomes personal.
Right.
So really helping people understand, oh, there's a lot that comes up. And I think that balancing, careers and raising kids and trying to take care of your health, and then, just as busy as life gets.
And you
I
might even
think
have your parents layered on that, right?
yes.
There's
Oh
like that
yes,
whole.
in-laws and outlaws. Exactly.
And it's interesting. It is true. I mean, you would come to it with how you were brought up,
Mhm.
and whether you thought it was good or bad,
Yeah.
but how you think something should be done, and your partner is entirely different. And
Mhm.
I guess a lot of couples don't have those conversations of how the differences are and what would work and what wouldn't.
Mhm. Yeah.
Do you bring that into the conversations, or
Mhm.
are you more trying to help them make sure they have a relationship?
Well, I think what's so interesting is I think there is a hope that you're selecting a good partner. And sometimes when you're in a partnered relationship and you have children together, the ship has sailed on the selection process. So I think at that point, it's about really developing tools and skills for how to communicate, how to know what's important to you, how to know what's important to the other person. Because the thing about life is like whether it's work, whether it's finances, kids, even health issues, sometimes we don't know how we're going to react until we're there.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's impossible to try to like excavate everything out to the surface. But if you have a toolkit of, oh, I'm going to understand that things activate things in me. That's the stress. Stress is really the way I look at it, is it's just a mismatch between what we wanted or expected and what we're perceiving is happening. And knowing that that's just going to be part of life, is we're going to encounter a new situation and think, well, that's not going the way I expected. And we might ask ourselves, well, what did we expect? And it's like, I didn't know I had an expectation until that happened.
Right.
So just being able to even like, almost like I'm doing that kind of body movement of just kind of like absorbing, like, oh, I'm recognizing that there's that I'm activated in some way. I'm feeling stress. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling angry, overwhelmed, whatever it is. And oh, there's maybe a mismatch, and being able to separate our reactions from our partner's actions is
Right.
such a powerful tool.
Right. Yeah. And I've seen it happen in couples where a, a request or a comment or an observation has
Mm.
created such a strong reaction, which,
Yeah.
you know, without conversation about, or maybe the person's not even aware of it, it's like, why
Mhm.
was that such a strong reaction
Mhm.
to what was probably not, the reaction was probably a bit of out of proportion with the comment or the
Yeah.
observation. It's like, how does that happen? And I guess
Mhm.
what kind of tools do you think help those couples kind of bring themselves back down?
Mhm.
What's your approach for that?
Well, I would say just even fundamentally saying that everything that our partners say and do is just it's something that, I mean, even literally biologically, they say things and we receive it, and our reactions are in our receiving of it. And I think just being able to say, "Oh, there's something happening in me that's interpreting this a certain way." And just being able to pause and almost just hang out. What's going on? What am I feeling? How did I interpret that? So I think the first tool is just to recognize our own reactions as being created from within ourselves. So, what's so interesting, and we see this on the internet all the time, one person could say a sentence that has 20 different reactions. And even inside us, like the same comment might hit us differently one day or another day. So I think it's just reassuring in a way. It's like, oh, my mind is just reacting all day long. And if the first tool I can do is just going, oh, okay, I'm having a reaction here. What's going on? And turn the attention onto my reaction, my interpretation, instead of just like, maybe lashing back out or asking our partners to please be different people and do different things so that we don't have those reactions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I sometimes, like, I can remember a long time ago, don't pick a partner who you're trying to turn into what you want. Pick the one who's already mostly there. Because sometimes asking someone to change
Mhm.
is like it's not in their scope of availability
Yes.
wherever they are,
Yes.
which is why I was divorced. you
Well,
know?
and we don't like to be on the other side of that either.
Yeah, I know. It's
Yeah. It's
true.
like,
It's
I thought
like,
you were going to love me unconditionally.
yeah, forever and
Yeah.
ever till no, no, I don't believe until death do us part, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, it is interesting and it's true. I remember I was listening to a podcast and the person was saying, no one can make you angry.
Yeah.
You know, it's just information coming in
Mhm.
and your reaction is anger. They didn't make you angry.
Right.
So It's recognizing that you can
Hmm.
choose. There is, you will react. Like,
Hmm.
we're humans, we're going to react. But
Yep.
then you have to press the pause button and go, whoa, what was
Yeah.
that? Right?
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
I interviewed a woman a while ago. Her name was Alice Langholt, and she it's called the 90-Day Peace Project,
Mm.
and
Love it.
30 days of it are on ins, Insight Timer, if you use
Hmm.
Insight Timer
Hmm.
as for people who meditate. And I think it's also on her website. But it's interesting because I did it. I just
Hmm.
did the 30 days, and we're not asking to sit and navel gaze for an hour a day or anything, but it is trying to teach you in tiny little snippets, like 2 minutes, building you up to that ability to say, oh, I just had a feeling. Where did that come from? What
Right.
was that? What was that about? Is it about them? Because it's not really usually. It's usually about you,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
then why did I have that, and what can I do with that? And sometimes you can unpack that with your partner, but sometimes you can't, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Depends. Do you see your um, couples at the same time? Because you do
I have.
one
I
on one,
do
or is
one
it two?
on now. I have worked with couples previously, and it can be helpful to explain and give context. But what's really satisfying is that's absolutely not necessary. I think, in fact, that's why I'm so passionate really about coaching, is that one person can raise their own awareness and raise the maturity to just kind of slow down and say, oh, I'm reacting. And the partner doesn't have to know anything about it or do anything differently. Like sometimes it's wonderful to talk through those things, and sometimes it's not necessary, which I think is so powerful. And also something you said just made me remember not only the identifying, like, oh, we're having the reaction, that's something coming from inside me as I'm just interpreting, but also one of the most freeing things that I've ever seen, and I see it in clients, is letting go the expectation that everything is supposed to be calm to happy. That if you're frustrated, it doesn't mean anything's gone wrong. It means that you're having a reaction of frustration. If you're upset or sad, and that doesn't mean to just kind of gaslight ourselves or anything, not at all, but just recognizing like, oh, human beings, we we feel annoyed and we feel joyful. And they're both really kind of neutral. It's an indicator.
Right.
Oh, I'm noticing this. This is really annoying. And then you can kind of pause and say, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just what am I learning from this? Is there information here? So sometimes what's really powerful and is that you can actually make a lot of changes in yourself, of just your relationship with yourself, that magically seems to make your partnered relationship better.
Well, I
Yeah.
think it partly because you start being different,
Hmm.
right,
Yeah.
in that relationship, and they change to react to the new
Mhm.
you or the
Yes.
different you.
Yes.
And it is true. I mean, I can see where it's happened in my own life and
Mm.
in friends, where if you just start being different,
Mm.
they might not, it might be like an instant, you know, choirs of angels or anything,
Yeah.
but there will be a shift.
Hmm.
And I wonder sometimes if people resist that because they're like, oh, I think they should change. Do you
Hmm.
find you get any of that in your,
Oh yeah.
yeah?
Oh, wouldn't life be lovely? Life would be so much like there'd be so much simplicity of just being like, I just want them to change. And there are times where you can ask for change. Absolutely. I actually think ask for whatever you want. The other person is a grown up and gets to decide if they want to comply or not. So I think that's actually really free and actually really intimate. Like people want to have really connected, intimate relationships. And sometimes that means making a polite request that is denied. And
Right.
that's everybody's truth. So, of course, the thing that we would want, like, and we're really kind of taught that way, that relationship harmony means that the other person does things to make us happy. Like, just like you can't make someone angry, you can't make someone happy either.
Right.
And And yet, when you just, I think it's such an interesting progression when people say, well, my partner does this. That's the way they are. That's the way they've always been. Or maybe this is something new, but this is what the weather is like today. And I'm not going to stand outside and blow the clouds away to try to expose the sun. I'm just going to say it's cloudy today, but it's sunny inside me or whatever. Um,
Right.
so, of course, we want the things to adjust to reduce the friction for us. And because life doesn't work that way, what do we do instead? That's really kind of the fun challenge.
Right. Yeah. And what do we do instead, Lisa?
What we do instead is we really like just own like we have so much power over how we feel
Oh
and
my
how we
gosh.
think about ourselves. Like
I
it's
wonder
just so
sometimes if people,
great.
yeah, I wonder sometimes if people don't realize how much power they have about
Mm.
what's going on for and with them, for them.
Hmm.
And I brush over it every now and then, but I think I think I have to start digging into it deeper because people have so much power that they just was it wasn't there a Kardashian commercial at one point for cell phones? Don't leave your gigabytes on the table. Don't leave your power to someone else. I
Hmm.
mean, you get to decide, and it's so powerful. And when you get into that alignment, weren't we talking alignment earlier? Or was that somebody else? I can't remember.
Alignment's out there, whether we
Alignment,
were talking about
alignment,
it or not. Yes.
alignment. If you can align with your partner, I mean, I think I remember when my current partner and I, have you heard of the book, The 100 Hard Questions?
Hmm.
So when we first started dating, we sat and had those conversations, but it was so different than anyone else that I had ever dated that
Hmm.
it's like, we're going to talk about these things. We're going to, it's not, carved in stone or anything, but it's like, this is how we feel about these things. How do you feel? Okay, okay. And being open to having those conversations, but you can't always have that. So your next best option, I guess, is make sure that you are where you need to be and
Hmm.
use that power for you to be happy.
Hmm. I love that. I love all those exercises. In fact, there was this perks up on the internet every now and then, the 36 questions to fall in love. And I
Oh,
think having those conversations, it really opens people up to that real intimacy of, oh, you're sharing something of yourself, and the other person is sharing something with you. I think we forget what a privilege it is to have that level of sharing and conversation. That's not really common. It's not happening down at my grocery store anyway.
no. I
Yeah.
find conversation is a bit of a lost art
Yes.
because now everything is text messages and
Mhm.
sound bites.
Yes.
And apparently now we have less attention span than goldfish.
Yeah.
I heard not too long ago. So they're
What were
outpacing
you saying
us.
again? I'm just kidding.
Exactly. Where are we?
Yeah.
What day is it? No. What?
Yeah.
What? And the yeah, lots of thoughts just rushed through my brain all at one time. I was thinking about New Year's resolutions, and
Uh,
and you can't even stay focused on those. See,
right.
they're. Psh,
Right.
I think most people fail by
Mm.
February 15th or something. Like there's some date
Yes.
that scientists have realized that people have just stopped
Mm.
because it's I guess because it's work. It's because they're
Mhm.
trying to be different. So do you find when you're helping people that they get to where it's too hard to be
Mhm.
different or and they give up or like what kind of support
Hmm.
what's the best support for people who are kind of trying to figure out how to navigate that?
I love that question because, um, yes, sometimes people do choose to exit. Like, for example, like in a partnered relationship, sometimes the best choice for both is to exit gracefully. I think we all remember Gwyneth Paltrow and her conscious uncoupling, and we chuckle at that, but um, it's so respectful. And one of the things that you were mentioning, like the attention span of New Year's resolutions and how, we're all fired up. We're going to be as thin and rich and, like interesting as we've ever been. And then middle of February, it's like, eh. And I think that actually comes down to competing desires.
Hmm.
So a lot of times we have things that we want aspirationally, and then there are things that we want from like that comfort part of us, like that there is such a strong pull from our brains. It's like, this is what we know, this is the habits and patterns that define who we are. And if we change, I don't know who I am anymore in this new
Right.
framework. So I think each partner has a, I don't know, it's just an invitation. It's a privilege. It's such a beautiful thing to bring to a relationship, knowing what you want and what you value. And I've actually talked a little bit about like my idea of leadership in relationship is really knowing what you value first and knowing how you're going to give those values, whether it's leading a team at work or leading in your marriage, is what's really important to you. What do you want? Before we're asking other people to do what we want, I think sometimes we're not always real dialed in on what matters most to us. And then we make decisions from that kind of that core of value and identity.
That's like, that's like so spot on, because you can see people who it's all chemical animal
Mhm.
desire, and then
Mhm.
they're in the relationship and they're like, oh shoot, this isn't actually what I want in a relationship.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's, yes, there is the intimacy, and that side needs to work properly, but it's only so much of your relationship, right?
Mhm.
And I remember my husband had it, called it his non-negotiable list that he had
Mhm.
developed,
Mhm.
because he had done that thought process of, what do I want
Mhm.
in a relationship, and what will I not accept
Mhm.
in a relationship. And if you haven't gone through that, I mean, it's like taking a road trip without a map. Who knows what you end up with?
Mhm.
And you might discover you're in the wrong place, like Bugs Bunny should have taken that right turn at Albuquerque. Is that what he always said? I can't remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I wonder sometimes if that's where a lot of relationships kind of hit the rocks. It's like, oh, this
Mhm.
isn't who I thought I, or maybe they didn't even think about it. This isn't who I want to be with,
Mhm.
and then have to extricate themselves. Do you think any of those are, I don't want to say salvageable, but still viable?
Mhm. Yeah, I will say, um, I've also studied a lot of the Gottman's work
Hmm.
and like did their level 1, level 2 training, and then the level 2, there's a lot of like workshops and you see a lot of sessions, and it's just so interesting to me after studying their work because they've been researching couples for it's got to be about 50 years now, and they have all that longitudinal data, and they say the most important quality to have in a partner is kindness. And outside of that, it's so funny. I've heard them interviewed, and they're like, in every relationship, there are unresolved conflicts. It's just you're going to go round and round and round. And if you leave that relationship and get into a new one, you you're just going to have another set of round and round. So everything comes with benefits and drawbacks. Everything's a little bit like 50% great and 50% challenging. Not exact math, but I think when it comes down to a couple really deciding like is there hope here, I think it's just for one thing, I think there's a lot of little tiny decisions and maybe conversations, observations, but it never ceases to amaze me that sometimes couples where you're thinking, I don't know about this one. Not as their coach. I think everybody has the potential to create whatever they want to create. And where there's a will, sometimes there's a way. So
Right.
I really always like to be very encouraging and inviting that miracles can happen in relationships. I've seen it. And sometimes maybe like you said, there's that physical heat and that can sustain you for a certain amount of time, but chemically that just changes over elapsed time with a partner. But the commitment to being a good partner yourself and I don't know. I think it's just amazing what people can do. I am constantly um, impressed by and grateful for the people that I work with and the examples they set, and then just even in the broader community. It's amazing what people can do in their relationships if they're just not going to give up.
Right. And it's interesting that kindness,
Hmm.
I think that's key
Hmm.
to kind of life, really,
I think so.
right?
Yeah.
Kindness. And it's interesting. I'm just thinking about yoga. So I've been teaching yoga for 19 holy moly years. And
Yeah.
I started when I was 2. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding.
Yeah.
And one of the branches, one of the tenets of yoga is called ahimsa, which is nonviolence.
Mhm.
And I often translate that into kindness. And one of the things that is really important is that includes to yourself.
Mhm.
And I'd say first to yourself. You know, if you can be kind to yourself, you can be nonviolent to yourself in thought, action, and deed. So
Mhm.
even your thoughts,
Mhm.
then that translates into how you can interact with the world.
Mhm.
Because I have seen people who are different people
Mhm.
from front facing to not front facing. They'll be a different person at
Mhm.
work, a different person with their friends, and a different person with their spouse.
Mhm.
And I think that's not healthy, because if
Yeah.
you are presenting, you should. I mean, we always talk about you be you, be
Mhm.
yourself. That's the
Mhm.
latest thing these days, but maybe it's always been. I don't know. But if, like,
Yeah.
kindness, if you are kind to yourself, then that will translate to the world. And yes, if your partner is kind and they leave their socks on the floor, I think you could learn to live with it, right?
I love that you actually were just like reading my mind that I think the most important metric, as it were, of success in relationships, whether it's your partnered relationships, at work, anywhere, is how you treat yourself. Like, are you loving and kind and supportive? Like, wouldn't you love to be in a relationship who's like, I'm great. Like, we love being in relationships with confident, really genuine, authentic people. And so I think really being in love with yourself and being kind and seeing the best in yourselves, and things are a learning experience. And the more I'll just share, like, personally, and also I see it with the people that I work with, I am full. I am a whole. If there's something I need emotionally, physically, logistically, I feel responsible to go and make that happen. And it is really, really fun being in relationship, full people with full people. Like, I don't need someone to top me up.
Right,
I'm so full of myself in, like, the most, like, gracious, generous way, that it's just the people in my life. I just love them. Like, you just come in, I can just love on you. It's so much fun to appreciate you, but I'm not constantly, figuring out, do you measure up to my expectations? Do I measure up to your expectations? None of that is there. And it's, talk about less stress, more fun. Like, the
right.
relationships in my life are so much, like, they're so much richer, the better the relationship with me becomes. And just when I'm like, oh, there, it's not possible for Lisa to live Lisa anymore, I'll, like, unlock a new layer. So I definitely recommend whatever you can do to really solidify that, like self-respect, self-trust. Definitely. And talk about, like, to plug coaching again. That's exactly what you get from coaching.
That is.
Hmm.
And it's not like we're trying to fill you up. We're just trying to
Yeah.
help you see,
Yes.
really.
Yes. It's all there.
Right. It's already
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
You just got the blinders on,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is awesome. That's so cool. Whoa. Thank you, Lisa.
Oh, this was so much fun. We could talk about this all day.
I know we could, but before you
Yeah.
go, yeah, we
Mhm.
could go all day. That's the thing. You know, I get into the conversations,
Uh-huh.
but respecting your time. But
Mhm.
before well,
Mhm.
I always ask, do you
Mhm.
have a final word or 3 of wisdom?
Yes, I will share a thought that has really been with me. And and I joke because I got this thought from TV. I was watching TV and this character would say, always forward, never back. And I love that. So as it comes to relationships, anything in your life, if if I tell myself always forward, never back, like I can learn the lessons, but then I'm going forward. And I think that's so powerful in talking about relationships, all relationships, and especially those partnered relationships where there's just different variables that you encounter. Is if you look at like, okay, so this is where we're at, and how are we moving forward together. So that's my wisdom is whenever you're in a jam, just think always forward. And it's amazing what your mind will respond with when you're like, there's a solution, we're going to
There
find our
is,
way through this.
there's always a solution, always.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for spending some time with us and sharing your awesome knowledge. I'm going to tuck all those learnings away because I'm an input person.
Yeah, I love it.
100%.
Yeah.
And my friends on
Hmm.
the who are listening and watching, you can totally connect with Lisa. We've got all her we've got the website, and
Hmm.
everything you need to know about Lisa is over on her website.
On the
So,
website, and you can find me in all the places.
all the
Thank you so much
places.
for inviting me here to talk to all of your folks.
Yeah, no worries. I love the celebrity chats because I always meet very cool people and I always
Yeah.
learn something too. So,
Yeah.
bonus for me.
Right.
So, my friends, check out Lisa's website. Go and listen to the podcast. Heck, come on, you're a podcast listener. Go listen. And as always, if you found something useful, share it with your friends because the more listeners there are, the more people we can talk to. Have an amazing week, my friends. Take care.